The wind was dry, carrying dust like a memory too stubborn to be forgotten. Cora pulled her shawl tighter as she stepped off the wagon road and into the heart of Sycamore Junction, a forgotten town with peeling paint, sun-cracked signs, and eyes that followed every stranger like a threat. Her boots, once laced and polished, were now scuffed, the solace nearly worn through. She didn't have much left, a small leather satchel, her mother's skillet wrapped in linen, and 2 dried onions rattling inside like coins in a beggar's pocket. The town square was sleepy. A crooked saloon on one side and a general store on the other. A stray dog sniffed at her hem before trotting off. She walked past the saloon, ignoring the clinking glass and drunken laughter. Men lounged on the porch, their boots propped up, like they owned the land beneath her feet. Looks like the dust blew in something new. One of them called. She didn't answer. She never did. Not anymore. At the far end of the square, behind the blacksmith's shed, she found a rusted stove sitting cold and unused beside a pile of discarded vegetables and salted fat gone tough. She knelt beside it and opened her satchel. The skillet still gleamed, its cast iron blackened with love and time. She set it gently on the grate, struck a match, and fed it slivers of dry wood from the nearby pile. A few townsfolk watched from the corners, some curious, some suspicious. Who was this woman, and why was she cooking behind a forge? She took her time, peeling the onions with careful fingers, slicing the shriveled potatoes she had bartered for 2 towns ago. From her satchel, she pulled a tin of dried herbs, a gift from a kind widow she once helped during harvest. She crushed the herbs in her palm and let them fall into the pan, sizzling as they met hot fat. The scent rose like a promise, onions caramelizing, potatoes crisping, herbs softening the edges. The air changed. People noticed. From across the street, Elias Boone stood outside the feed store. Tall, built like he was carved from pine, with eyes the color of gunmetal and a permanent furrow in his brow, he watched her cook without a word. His hat shaded half his face, but his gaze was sharp. He didn't speak to those around him and rarely came into town unless he had to. Folks said he'd buried his brother 2 winters back and never smiled since. But now he was watching her like he recognized something in the way she moved, measured, focused, quiet. Cora finished the dish with a dash of salt, then spooned a portion onto a battered tin plate. She didn't eat it herself. She just sat quietly, letting the smell do the talking. One of the loafers from the saloon called out again. "Hey, lady, what are you doing? Selling breakfast or making a statement?" Cora didn't answer. Elias stepped forward. The men fell silent as he approached, his boots heavy on the planks, his shadow long and certain. Without asking, he picked up the plate, took a bite, and stood chewing with the kind of silence that said he was thinking hard. After a long pause, he swallowed. "You got a place to stay?" he asked, voice low, rough from years of disuse. Cora met his eyes. "No, sir, just need to keep moving." Elias looked at the skillet, then at her. "You cook like that every day?" She nodded once. He jerked his chin toward his horse. "Come on. You'll ride with me. Kitchen at the ranch is gone cold since my last cook-up and left. You can stay long as you need." Cora stared at him. No promises, no questions, no papers to sign. Just a simple offer from a man who didn't talk much either. She stood, picked up her skillet, and followed him. Behind her, the townsfolk murmured. No one stopped her. No one offered her anything else. But the scent of her cooking lingered long after the skillet was gone, like a story just getting started. And just like that, without a word of her past, her name, or the pain she carried in. Silence. Cora rode away from Sycamore Junction, not as a stray woman with dust on her boots, but as a cook hired by the quietest rancher in the county. And for the first time in months, she felt like she might belong somewhere. If only for a little while. Cora didn't speak much on the ride out to Boone. ranch. Elias didn't either. The horse's steady gait carried them down winding trails framed by whispering cottonwoods and dry creek beds. Summer hung thick in the air, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled low like a sleeping bear. Cora kept her eyes ahead, both hands gently resting on her skillet in her lap, as if afraid it might vanish if she didn't hold on tight. Elias rode slightly ahead, hat low, shoulders squared, saying nothing. He didn't offer small talk, didn't ask questions. And Cora didn't fill the silence, not because she was shy, but because she'd learned what kind of people were worth speaking to. Elias seemed the type who listened more with his eyes than his ears. They arrived at the ranch just as the sun began to tilt westward. The house was simple 2 stories, weathered pine boards, a porch with a single rocking chair and no cushion. Behind it stretched a spread of dusty fields, a barn sagging slightly to one side, a chicken coop with no chickens in sight. The place felt quiet, almost too quiet. Elias dismounted first, tied off his horse, then turned toward her. "You can have the room over the kitchen," he said. "It's clean. No one's used it since." He didn't finish the sentence, just nodded once. "You hungry?" "I can fix something," she replied instinctively, standing with skillet in hand. He blinked, then cracked the barest hint of a smile. "Let's see what you can do." The kitchen was a ghost of better days. Dust on the windowsills, a table with 1 good leg and 3 wobbly ones. Cabinets mostly bare except for cornmeal, dried beans, and a sack of flour tied at the top like a money pouch. The stove still worked, though it wheezed when she lit it. Cora moved like she belonged there. No fumbling, no questions. She boiled water, picked out the good beans, mashed some into cakes with cornmeal and a pinch of salt. She found lard hardened in a tin near the stove and used it to fry the cakes until they browned on both sides. She boiled the rest of the beans in broth she made from salted pork left behind in the pantry stringy, but still usable. While the food simmered, Elias leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her. Not like a man judging, more like a man remembering. The smells creeping through the house seemed to wake something in him, something half asleep. "Smells like home again," he said under his breath. Cora didn't reply, but she heard it. She plated the food, nothing fancy, just beans and cakes, and set it on the table. 1 plate. No second. Elias sat down without a word, took 1 bite, then stopped. He stared at the fork, chewing slowly. She stood nearby, her hands folded, eyes fixed on the stove. He ate another bite, then another, still no words, but something about the way he chewed slower, how he looked at the plate like it surprised him. It was all the answer Cora needed. After several minutes, he looked up. "You cook like that every night, you'll have a roof here as long as you want." She finally looked him in the eye. "I won't take charity, Mr. Boone, just a fair trade. You feed me, I feed the horses. Sounds even." A pause stretched between them. The sun outside sank a little lower. She gave a small nod. "All right, then." He stood, carried his plate to the wash basin, and turned to leave, but then paused. "You can sleep in tomorrow. Sunday. No chores." "I don't sleep late," she said simply. He nodded again, tipping his hat. "Good." And then he was gone. Cora exhaled, long and quiet, as if she'd been holding her breath since the town. She looked around the kitchen, the cracked floor, tiles, the grease-smudged stovepipe, the window pane painted with dust. It wasn't much, but it was the first real roof offered to her in months that didn't come with a price, and all it had taken was 1 bite. The morning light crept slowly over the Boone ranch, brushing the tops of fence posts and the warped barn roof in gold. Cora was already awake, standing barefoot in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, hair twisted into a tight knot behind her head. The floor creaked beneath her with every step as she examined what little was left in the pantry. A half sack of oats. 2 jars of preserved peaches, one with a cracked lid. A few old carrots in a wooden crate and a tin of molasses hardened around the edges. It wasn't much. But then again, she'd fed 6 siblings on less back in Arkansas. She boiled the oats. Slowly, careful not to scorch them. Added water from the pump, stirred in a spoonful of molasses to soften the bitterness. When she heard boots on the porch and the thump of a bucket being dropped, she reached for the chip bowls and served. The meal like she was serving kings. Elias came in first, the brim of his hat still wet with dew. He gave her a small nod and sat down without a word, eating with the slow steadiness of a man used to going without. 2 ranch hands followed. One was tall and wiry, with sun-reddened skin and eyes that darted around like he didn't trust stillness. The other was younger, a quiet Mexican boy who didn't speak English but offered Cora a grateful smile as she poured him water. The tall one, Maynard, didn't say thank you. Just poked at the oats and muttered, "Guess the new cook's got simple tastes." Cora didn't flinch. She didn't need to. Elias lifted his head and spoke, his voice low and final. "It's breakfast. You're eatin'. Be grateful." Maynard grunted but shut his mouth. Cora didn't linger after the meal. She washed the bowls, swept the floor, and then stepped out to hang the dishcloths in the morning breeze. The ranch beyond the porch stretched wide and empty, fields of golden grass, swaying under the July sun. The barn groaned with age, its doors hanging crooked. The chicken coop hadn't seen a fresh egg in months. She saw horses in the corral, lean but healthy. Someone had been doing the bare minimum to keep this place alive. Just surviving. She turned at the sound of footsteps. Elias stood behind her, sipping from a tin cup of coffee. He wasn't watching her so much as watching the ranch, like he was looking through time itself. "This place was different once," he said. She waited. "My brother, Caleb, he kept it loud. Laughter every morning, jokes that made no sense. Singing to the horses like a fool. Even the stove seemed warmer when he was around." Cora said nothing, but she didn't turn away either. "He died in the stampede 2 winters ago. Never even saw it coming. Horses spooked after a storm. I still hear 'em running at night." He paused. "After that, things just quieted down. The cook left. The help drifted. Can't blame them. I wasn't much for company." Cora looked at the fields, the barn, the broken fences. "You kept it from falling," she said simply. He glanced at her. "Maybe, but I didn't build it back up." A silence settled between them. Not awkward. Just honest. Then Elias cleared his throat and stepped off the porch. "I'll be out at the north fence today. If Maynard gives you trouble, you let me know." "I can handle trouble," she replied. He gave a half smile. "Yeah, I believe that." After he left, Cora walked the perimeter of the ranch on her own, not out of curiosity, but because it helped her know what she had to work with. She made mental notes of broken boards on the chicken coop, the old garden bed buried beneath weeds, the unused smokehouse out back. She saw where life used to bloom and had since gone silent, and as the wind picked up and carried the smell of hay and rust and memory, she felt something stir inside her. This place wasn't dead. It was just waiting. Waiting for a spark. Waiting for warmth. Waiting for hands that knew how to take scraps and build a meal and maybe something more. By the time the sun dipped toward noon, she was already planning what to make for supper. She had no money, no family, and no past she dared speak of. But here, on this quiet ranch with its broken fences and haunted silence, Cora saw the beginnings of something she thought she'd lost forever. A place she could mend. By the 4th day, Sycamore Junction was humming with speculation. It didn't take much to stir the town's gossip mill, especially not when Elias Boone, the rancher known for turning away company and kindness alike, was suddenly housing a strange woman with nothing but a skillet and a quiet mouth. Cora wasn't seen in town again after that first morning, but people talked like they saw her every day. She's probably some outlaw's widow, murmured Mrs. Geraldine Avery behind her lace curtains. No, she's too clean for that, replied her friend Martha. I'll bet she's one of those traveling seductresses. You know, the kind that drifts in, feeds you a meal, and ends up in your will. The saloon girls had their own theories. One claimed she saw Elias riding in with her, sitting behind him like a wife. Another said Elias had been writing letters for months to order himself a mail-order bride, the quiet type to match his personality. It wasn't jealousy that fueled the fire. It was unease. Cora didn't fit into their mold. She wasn't loud, flirty, or desperate. She didn't beg for scraps or try to impress anyone. She just was present, polite, and private. And that scared people more than if she'd come in guns blazing. Back at Boone Ranch, Cora didn't know what they said, but she felt it, the tension in Maynard's gaze every time she stepped outside, the way the ranch hands whispered when they thought she wasn't listening, the way even the horses lifted their heads and stared longer than they should. At supper that evening, she made wild onion soup with fried cornbread and a peach cobbler sweetened with molasses. The smell brought the ranch hands in earlier than usual. Maynard slumped into his seat and muttered, "You setting out to fatten us or poison us?" Elias, seated at the head of the table, slowly raised his head. "You don't like it, you? Can eat your boot." Cora didn't flinch. She just ladled the soup into bowls like she hadn't heard a thing. After supper, Elias stepped onto the porch, pipe in hand. Cora joined him after cleaning the dishes. The air was cooler now, stars stretching wide above the ranch. Somewhere a lone coyote howled. "They're talking in town," Elias said suddenly. Cora didn't respond. "Saw Martha and Geraldine today at the general store. They asked how long you were staying. Told them as long as you want." Cora kept her arms folded, eyes on the stars. "Don't matter what they say." He studied her. "It does if it gets folks looking too close." She stiffened slightly, then said, "I never done anything they'd hang me for." "That's not what I asked." "No," she said softly, "but it's what you meant." A long silence passed between them, the kind that told the truth louder than words. Finally, Elias nodded. "I don't need your past. Just your cooking." Cora gave a ghost of a smile. "You sure about that?" He shrugged. "You keep feeding me like this, you could have been a bank robber for all I care." She turned toward him, face more open than before. "And what about them? Your ranch hands? The town?" Elias stared into the dark. "They'll get used to it, or they won't." Cora liked that. It was simple. No promises, no explanations. Just quiet loyalty. But loyalty was a dangerous thing to trust. She knew that better than anyone. The next morning, Maynard cornered her near the well. "You think cooking gets you a free pass here?" he asked, arms crossed, voice low and bitter. "You think just 'cause the boss likes your biscuits, you get to run the place?" Cora didn't even blink. "I think you're hungry and angry, and neither one's my fault." He stepped closer. "You ain't the first pretty girl to come through this place, and you won't be the last, so don't get too comfortable." She stepped right past him. "I never am." But inside, her heart beat a little faster. She knew the type. Men who didn't like quiet women because quiet women couldn't be controlled. Men who tried to make you feel unsafe just because they felt unseen. Back inside, she stirred the stew and added salt like nothing had happened. But she knew trouble had just found its voice, and if it kept pushing, it was going to hear hers too. The nights at Boone Ranch were as quiet as the man who ran it. The wind sometimes whispered through the dry grass, and a loose shutter on the barn clapped now and then, but otherwise, The house sat still like a place frozen between one lifetime and the next. Cora had settled into a rhythm. Up before dawn, cooking oats or biscuits, cleaning what needed cleaning, quietly tending the stove like it was a living thing. She didn't ask questions. She didn't look through drawers. She didn't explore past the kitchen or her small room. But that night after supper, after Elias had stepped out to smoke his pipe under the stars, something nudged her from her usual stillness. The pantry door had creaked earlier when she'd grabbed salt, and she noticed something strange behind the top shelf, a sliver of leather just peeking out from behind a flour tin. She wasn't snooping. It had practically fallen into her hands when she reached for the cornmeal. She pulled it free. It was a Bible worn, water-stained, the kind of Bible that had seen storms and grief. Not Elias's, she guessed. This one had a name written on the found inside cover in faded ink. Caleb Boone. She stared at it for a long moment. It felt wrong to hold it, and yet somehow more wrong to put it back without opening it. She turned the first few pages carefully. Tucked just past the Psalms was an envelope. Yellowed, the corner curled with time. It wasn't sealed, and the handwriting on the front was shaky but sure. Elias, in case I don't come back. Cora stood motionless, holding the letter like it might burn her. She glanced toward the window. The porch was empty. Elias hadn't returned yet. She didn't read it, not one word. Just walked it to the kitchen table and laid it down, right in the center, where he couldn't miss it. Then she cleaned her hands, wiped the counter again, and returned to her room. Like nothing had changed, but everything had. Elias didn't say a word when he came in. She heard the door creak, the chair scrape, the rustle of paper. Then silence. She didn't expect anything more, but just before she blew out her lamp that night, there was a knock at her door. "Miss Cora?" came Elias's voice, rougher than usual. "Yes?" There was a pause. "You find that letter?" "I did. You read it?" "No, sir." Another pause. "Then, you could have." She sat on the edge of her bed, fingers tightening around the blanket. "I didn't need to." Elias exhaled long, like a man who'd held something in for far too long. He wrote it before the roundup that year. Said he had a bad feeling. I told him he was just tired. We always ignored bad feelings back then. A bitter chuckle. Should've. Listened. Cora opened the door gently. Elias stood there, letter in one hand, hat in the other. He looked more like a brother than a rancher just then, like a man who'd finally let grief show its face. I couldn't bring myself to open it, not until tonight. She didn't ask what it said, but he told her anyway. Said I'd do all right without him. Said the ranch would need more than me, eventually. Said to open the door again when someone worth feeding showed up. Cora's heart caught. Elias looked down. "You think that's you?" She blinked. "I don't know." "I do," he said. Quietly. "Place feels like it's breathin' again. Since you came." She stepped back to let him see the tidy kitchen from the doorway, still glowing faintly in lantern light. The air held the memory of tonight's cornbread, of warmth that came not just from food, but from care. "I'm not looking to be saved," she said, voice low. "I'm not trying to save anyone," Elias replied. "Just trying not to lose what's left." And with that, he tipped his head and turned away. The door closed behind him. Cora sat back down, the silence fuller than before, rich, heavy, but not lonely. And though she'd never read the letter, she knew what it really sighed. "Don't stop living, brother. And when someone quiet shows up, listen close. She might be the one to bring it all back." The day started hot, with no hint it would turn sideways. Cora had risen before the sun, as always, and made cornmeal pancakes and eggs collected fresh. From the hen house, some of the hens had finally started laying again under her care. Elias had said little during breakfast, but his eyes lingered on her a little longer than usual. Not in a way that made her nervous, more like he was still carrying the weight of that letter and hadn't quite figured out where to set it down. The chores rolled in as the sun climbed, mending tack, checking fence lines, hauling water. Cora kept to the kitchen, shelling peas and planning for Sunday dinner. But as she swept the floor mid-morning, she realized she was out of potatoes. The cellar had some, if she remembered right, tucked beneath a blanket in a crate. She grabbed her lantern and opened the heavy wooden door at the back of the pantry. The cellar stairs were steep, cool air brushing her face as she stepped down. The scent of dirt and dried roots filled her lungs. Her footsteps echoed soft on the stone floor as she crossed to the crate tucked in the corner. That's when she heard it, a dry, warning rattle. She froze. Her eyes snapped toward the sound coming from beneath the shelf, hidden in shadow, and then she saw it. Coiled tight, scales like dusted bronze, eyes locked on her like it was daring her to move. Rattlesnake. Her breath hitched. Her hand trembled slightly as she set the lantern down, never breaking eye contact with the beast. She didn't scream, didn't panic, just backed away, slow and steady, like she was slipping from the jaws of a nightmare. She had nearly reached the stairs when the cellar door above slammed open. Boots thundered down the steps. Elias. He spotted her frozen near the bottom and the glint of the coiled snake. Without hesitation, he drew the pistol from his belt and aimed low. Crack. The sound deafened in the close walls. The snake's body jerked, then went still. Cora didn't move for a moment, stunned by the sudden violence. Her heart beat hard beneath her ribs. "You all right?" Elias asked, stepping closer, eyes scanning her for blood or bites. I didn't step close. Just heard it." "Thank you," she said, voice soft but steady. He holstered the gun, bent down to check the snake. "Big one. Could have killed you." Cora nodded slowly. "Wasn't my first time seeing one, but I never got bit. Always figured being quiet saved me." Elias glanced at her, something in his face changing. He handed her his handkerchief. "You're shaking." She took it and wiped her palms. "I'm fine. Just surprised me." "You didn't scream," he said, almost to himself. "I learned not to. Screaming never helped much." That made him go quiet. He lifted the snake's body and carried it outside, tossing it far into the brush. When he returned, Cora was already back in the pantry, picking up the lantern and brushing herself off. "I still need them potatoes," she said. He stared at her for a second, then gave a slow, impressed nod. "You're tougher than you look. I get that a lot." As she carried the potatoes back into the kitchen, Elias stood in the doorway and watched her work. He didn't speak, but his presence was solid, like he was keeping guard, just in case. Later, over lunch, she noticed something else. Maynard was quiet. No snide remarks, no sideways glances, but his eyes flicked between her and Elias. Watching, measuring. Cora didn't let it bother her, not on the surface. But in her chest, something new took root, a sliver of fear. Not of snakes or storms, but of men like Maynard who let anger simmer just beneath the skin. Who didn't like it when women proved they were stronger than they seemed? That night, after the dishes were done and Elias had gone to bed, Cora stepped out to the porch alone. The air was still. No wind, no coyotes. Just stars blinking quietly overhead. She sat on the steps, skillet beside her, resting against her knee like a weapon. The cellar had reminded her of something important. Silence could keep you safe, but only if you knew when to break it. And if trouble came again, snake or man, she'd be ready to do more than just stand still. Sunday morning arrived with the quiet hush of a prayer. The sun rose gently over Boone Ranch, casting warm gold over the fields. The hens, few though they were, clucked softly from the coop. The wind was mild. Even the horses seemed to move. slower, as if the land itself had taken a deep breath. Inside the kitchen, the warmth came not from the stove, but from Cora herself. She was already at work, sleeves rolled, apron dusted with flour, lips pressed in quiet focus. There was a kind of rhythm to her hands, a reverence for the food she made. Not just meals, but memories, comfort, and peace disguised as cornbread. And gravy. Today, she decided to make something whole. She wasn't cooking to feed hunger. She was cooking to feed something else, something Elias hadn't named, and maybe couldn't. She'd risen early, dug up the last of the potatoes, soaked beans overnight, used the last 2 eggs for bread. It was a risk, using so much. But something inside her said today needed to be different. She set the table with 4 plates. Elias came in first, hair damp from washing, boots cleaner than usual. He paused when he saw the spread. Then his eyes caught the 4th chair, sat neatly with a plate, fork, cup, and folded napkin. "There's only 3 of us," he said quietly. Cora didn't look up from stirring the gravy. "I know." His jaw tensed slightly, but he didn't question her. The 2 ranch hands arrived next. Maynard muttered something under his breath, but when he saw the roast potatoes, fried greens, and warm apple bread, he shut up and sat down. No one spoke much. At first, just the sound of eating, of spoons scraping gently against bowls, of coffee being poured. Then Elias cleared his throat. "Miss Cora went all out this morning," she shrugged lightly. "It's Sunday," Maynard snorted. "Didn't figure you. The churchin' type." "I ain't," she replied. "But folks need a reason to sit together. Might as well be good food." Elias glanced again at the empty chair. Cora saw it too. She didn't say the name, but they both thought it. Caleb. After the meal, Cora took a slow walk around the ranch, apron still tied, shoes dusted with flour. She stopped at the little stone rise behind the barn. There, half hidden by tall grass, was a simple wooden cross. C.B. Nothing more. She stood for a long time, not speaking, not crying, just being. When she returned to the kitchen, Elias was sitting at the table alone, a cup of coffee in hand, staring at the 4th plate. The others had gone. The food had been cleared, but he hadn't moved. He didn't look up when she entered. "Just said he used to make jokes during Sunday breakfast. Stupid ones, real dumb. But he'd keep talking just to hear the ranch hands groan." Cora leaned against the counter. "That why you stopped serving Sunday meals?" He nodded. Couldn't bear the silence without him. She walked over, gently lifted the unused plate, and said, "Silence can mean different things." He looked up. "What do you mean?" She carried the plate to the sink, rinsing it clean. "It used to mean pain for me. Now sometimes it just means peace, memory, respect." He watched her hands move with care. "I don't set that chair because I think he'll sit in it," she added. "I set it because he did, and that matters." Elias stood slowly, walked over, rested a hand on the back of the empty chair. Then, quietly, "Thank you," she nodded. "It's not just your house, Elias. It's his too. And anyone who sat at this table, past or present, deserves a plate." For the first time, Elias didn't look weighed down by silence. He looked like a man carrying something valuable, fragile, worth remembering. That night, as the lanterns were dimmed and the timid pavone house settled into sleep, Cora passed the kitchen table once more. She didn't touch the 4th chair. She didn't need to. She just paused, set a folded napkin in its center, and whispered, "You're still welcome here." And the room for a moment felt full. Monday came with the sky heavy and gray, like the land was holding its breath. Cora was kneading dough when she heard the distant clatter of hooves. Not the usual sound of Elias returning from the pasture or Maynard riding to town. This was different, sharper, faster. She wiped her hands on her apron and moved to the porch, squinting toward the trail that led to the ranch. A rider approached fast, dust trailing behind him like a warning. He wore a deputy star that caught the morning sun bright and cold as Iron Dot Deputy Reeves. Cora felt her stomach drop, her hands suddenly too still. She turned quickly, slipping. Back inside, her breath shortened. She hadn't seen that face since the border town in Texas where she'd run after the last time she'd been cornered. Back then, Reeves had spoken sweet but hunted mean. She'd escaped with a skillet, a bruise on her arm, and a burning in her soul that still hadn't gone out. She thought she was far enough now, thought she'd changed her name enough times, thought her silence would protect her. But trouble always remembered your scent. Elias met the rider at the gate. She watched from the window, heart pounding, fingers pressing into her apron. Reeves dismounted with the swagger of a man who never doubted he was welcome, even when he wasn't. He removed his hat and grinned like he smelled a secret. "Boone," he said, "heard you took in a woman. Real quiet type. Good cook. Pretty eyes." Elias didn't smile. "You come out here for gossip?" "No," Reeves said, brushing dust off his coat. "I come for justice. There's a woman matches her. Description name of Cora Mae Winslow. Disappeared from Galveston 3 months back. Was involved in a robbery and a stabbing. Real slippery." Elias crossed his arms. "You got a warrant?" Reeves shrugged. "Not yet. But if it's her, she's got a bounty on her head." Elias stared hard. "You bring papers next time. Otherwise, you leave." Reeves smirked. "You might be harboring a fugitive." "I might be," Elias said. "But she's feeding this ranch, not fleecing it. So until I see proof, you can ride on." Reeves didn't like that. His jaw clenched. "Tell her I'll be back, and next time I'll bring chains." Cora was already outside when Elias returned. She didn't run, didn't hide, just stood there on the porch, arms folded, face pale but firm. "You knew," Elias said. She nodded. "You. Gonna tell me what happened?" Cora took a breath. 3 months ago, I was working in a tavern kitchen in Galveston. Place was rough, but I kept my head down. One night, a man named Darrell came in. Said he wanted to marry me. Said I had soft hands in a quiet way. I told him no. Elias didn't interrupt. He didn't like that. Followed me home. Tried to force his way into the boarding house I stayed at. I hit him with a skillet. He fell down the stairs. Broke. His leg, maybe more. You run? She nodded. Didn't wait to find out if you lived. Just packed my things and left. Word must have spread. Someone pinned a robbery on me, probably him. Elias rubbed a hand over his face. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have let me stay? She asked. He didn't answer right away. Probably not. Not at first. She nodded again, as if she understood that more than he knew. I never wanted to cause trouble here, she said softly. This was the first place I wasn't scared to sleep. Elias looked at her, really looked. She didn't beg, didn't cry. Just stood there. Honest, braced for rejection. Reeves be back, he said. I'll be gone before then. No, Elias said, stepping forward. You're under my roof. You feed this house. You made it a home again. She blinked, surprised. I don't care what the law says you did. I care what you've done here, and that's more than most. She stared at him, chest rising with something sharp and soft at once. You don't have to protect me. He shook his head. Maybe not, but I want to. That night the ranch was quiet, but not with fear. Cora sat at the table, hands resting on a teacup, the fire flickering low. Elias sat across from her, rifle leaned by the door. He'd lit 2 lanterns instead of one, like he meant for her. To feel seen. She knew now. Silence wasn't just survival anymore. Here, it was a choice, and in Elias Boone's house she'd been chosen too. The storm came suddenly. Like most things that couldn't be stopped, it rolled in from the north, clouds black and thick like rising smoke. The wind howled through the open plains, bending fence posts and snapping dry branches as if warning the land to brace for what was coming. Cora stood on the porch, apron flapping at her sides, staring at the sky. She'd seen storms before back in Arkansas, before the fire, before the flight, but something about this one didn't feel natural. It felt like the past catching up. Inside the barn, Elias was pulling the last of the horses into shelter, barking orders at Maynard and the younger hand. Cora didn't wait for direction. She ran to the coop, ushering the chickens inside one by one, then secured the kitchen windows with what scrap boards she could find. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. She worked with the silence of someone who had lived through worse and didn't intend to live through it. Again, the first crack of thunder hit like a gunshot. Rain poured in sheets, slamming the earth and roof in angry fists. By dusk, the kitchen chimney began to rattle, the smoke blowing back into the room. Cora choked, grabbed a wet cloth, and started dousing the small sparks, curling near the stove's edge. That's when the fire started. One moment it was smoke. Next, flames licking the far corner of the pantry where dry sacks of flour and burlap hung too close to the hearth. "Fire!" she screamed, loud and sharp for the first time since she'd arrived. Within seconds, Elias burst in. Maynard behind him. "The pantry," she pointed. "I can't reach the wall. It's spreading too fast." Elias didn't hesitate. He grabbed the water barrel and flung half of it into the blaze, soaking the floor. Maynard threw his jacket on the flames. Cora grabbed her skillet, the one her mother gave her, the one that had followed her across 3 states, and slammed it down on burning cloth until the flames hissed and died. Smoke filled the room. Coughs echoed. Ash clung to their skin, but the fire was out. They stood there in silence, wet, shaking, and barely able to breathe, but safe. Maynard was the first to speak. I didn't think." He trailed off, eyes darting to Cora. "You yelled." She looked up, throat raw. Fire don't listen to whispers. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Elias turned to her, his hand on her shoulder, solid and warm. "You all right?" She nodded slowly. "Yeah, I am now." Later, as the rain died down and the smoke cleared, Cora sat on the porch steps with her skillet beside her, scorched and dented, but still intact. She turned it over in her lap like it was an old friend. The fire had taken some dried herbs, the last of her peaches, but not the house. Not her place here. Elias came out and sat beside her. "Could have been worse," he said. "Could have lost everything." He nodded. "You saved the kitchen, saved the house." She chuckled softly, voice hoarse. "All I did was scream." He glanced at her. "That was the first time I heard you raise your voice." It was the first time it needed raising. Elias grew quiet, then spoke low. "I wasn't fair to you when you first got here. I didn't ask who you were. And I didn't care. I just saw someone who made food that reminded me of home. I didn't see the rest." Cora looked down. "I didn't want to be seen. You were more than just a cook." "You still are." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't let tears fall. "I came here to hide. But somewhere between the biscuits and the quiet, I stopped running. That fire, it felt like something burning out of me." "Not just the pantry." Elias turned to her. "What happens when Reeves comes back?" She looked out at the land, soaked and steaming under the moonlight. "I'll stand. I won't hide anymore. I've done nothing worth chains." "You won't stand alone," Elias said. That promise hung between them, simple, unpolished, and strong. Forgiveness, she realized, doesn't always come in words. Sometimes it comes in the form of a man sitting beside you after a fire, offering nothing but his presence and his silence, and letting that be enough. The fire left its mark, smoke-stained rafters, a blackened beam in the pantry, and the lingering scent of scorched wood that clung to the walls like an old sorrow. But the house still stood, and so did she. In the days that followed, something shifted on Boone Ranch. Maynard, who had once sneered at her cooking and spat sideways glances, now nodded when he passed her in the yard. The younger ranch hand Juanito started bringing her eggs from the coop without being asked. Even the horses seemed to stand taller when she walked by, as if they, too, had decided she belonged. Cora didn't speak of the fire again. She didn't have to. It had burned away more than kindling. It had burned away the last bit of fear she carried, the part that still whispered she didn't deserve a place to stay, a roof to sleep under, or a life that didn't involve running. And now she wasn't running, not anymore. Reeves returned on a Tuesday. This time he came slower, no dust trail, no swagger. Elias met him in the yard. Cora stood on the porch, arms folded, chin high. The deputy dismounted and tipped his hat, but the smile he wore last time was gone. "Got the report," he said, voice clipped. "Turns out that stabbing in Galveston?" The man walked away with bruised ribs and a broken ego. Witnesses said he followed the girl, uninvited. Looks like she defended herself. Elias said nothing. Reeves glanced at Cora. "There's no warrant, no charges, no bounty. She's free to go or stay." Cora didn't flinch. "I'm not going." Reeves gave her a long look. "Didn't figure you would." He mounted his horse again. "Take care of yourself, Miss Winslow." "I will." As he rode off, Elias looked over his shoulder at her. "You all right?" She nodded. "Better than I've ever been." And she meant it. The next Sunday, she made the biggest meal the ranch had seen since Caleb died. Roast beef. Slow cooked with rosemary, buttered carrots from the garden bed she'd revived, cornbread with fresh honey, and peach pie, the kind with the lattice crust like her mother taught her. The kind you make when you're finally home. Juanito came in freshly washed, shirt tucked. Maynard even wore a clean vest and combed his hair. And Elias, he'd shaved. Not all the way, but enough to notice as they sat down at the table. Something new happened. Elias didn't take the head seat. He paused behind the chair at the end, the one Caleb used to take, and looked to Cora. "It's yours now," he said. Cora blinked. "What? You've earned it." "That seat's for the one who holds this house together. And that ain't me anymore." Her hands trembled for a moment, not from fear, but from the weight of what he was offering. Belonging. She took the seat. At the head of the table. No one questioned it. No one laughed. They just bowed their heads as Elias gave thanks, and for once, the silence wasn't stiff or awkward. It was full. She looked around at the men, rough and quiet in their own ways, scarred by seasons and losses, still learning how to live again, and she realized she wasn't just feeding them. She was mending them. Just like she was mending herself. That night, after the dishes were done and the moon hung low, Elias walked her to the porch. He didn't say much. He rarely did. But before he turned in, he paused. "I never thought a quiet woman with a skillet could fix a place like this." Cora smiled softly. It was never the skillet. It was the welcome. He nodded, then stepped down the porch and into the dark. Cora stayed, watching the stars blink overhead. She had no blood family here, no marriage, no written claim, but she had her place. Not in the shadows, not as a drifter, not as a secret. She was the head of the table now, and no storm, no fire, no lawman's lie could take that away.